few days after I buried my mother, I was alone in her bedroom, folding clothes and trying to make sense of the silence she left behind. That's when I found it. An old envelope hidden beneath the lining of her nightstand drawer, thick with dust, like it had been waiting for me. I took it to her lawyer expecting paperwork. Instead, his face went pale. He looked at me and whispered, "Don't let your sister find out." In that moment, everything I thought I knew about my family began to shift. I grew up in a small house in Pittsburgh's Hill District, the kind of place where every floorboard had a memory and every corner carried the echo of our voices. It wasn't big, it wasn't fancy, but it was ours. And at the center of it all was my mom. She worked night shifts as a nurse for as long as I can remember. While most people were settling into bed, she was tying her hair back, pulling on scrubs, and heading out the door with a tired smile. She never complained about the hours, never complained about the money either. If things were tight, she absorbed that quietly. Autumn and I didn't grow up thinking we were struggling. We just thought we were loved. I still remember the sound of the front door unlocking in the early morning, the soft click of her shoes as she stepped inside, exhausted, but determined to make us breakfast before catching a few hours of sleep. She would move slowly, carefully, like someone running on fumes, but she always made time. Eggs on the stove, toast in the pan, a quick kiss on the forehead before we left for school. Then she'd rest for a while, only to wake up again in the afternoon to help with homework, drive us to appointments, or sit at the kitchen table and listen to our stories about the day. I don't know how she did it. Looking back now, I realize she must have been running on almost nothing. But as kids, we just saw consistency. We saw safety. She handled everything on her own. Bills, groceries, school supplies. If one of us needed new shoes or wanted a book from the school fair, she found a way. Sometimes that meant she skipped buying something for herself. We didn't notice that part then. Now, I can't stop noticing it. And even without our father in the picture he left before I was born, she never filled the house with bitterness. She didn't tell us stories meant to turn us against him. She simply focused on us, on building something steady. Took me to the library one weekend. She'd took me to the library one weekend. She'd take Autumn to the park the next. If she bought drawing supplies for Autumn, she'd bring home a novel she knew I'd love. She paid attention to our differences. She remembered what made each of us light up. Sometimes she'd sit with me alone and ask about the books I was reading. Really, ask what I liked about the characters, what I thought would happen next. Other nights, she'd listen to Autumn talk about her sketches or her friends at school. She tried so hard to make it equal, balanced, and for the most part it was. But there were moments, small ones, that stayed with me. After long shifts, when the house was quiet and the dishes were done, I'd hear her and Autumn talking softly in the kitchen, their voices drifting down the hallway. Sometimes there was laughter, sometimes a serious tone I couldn't quite make out. I would sit in my room pretending to read, telling myself it didn't matter, that they just happened to be talking. It wasn't constant, it wasn't obvious, and it was never cruel. Still, I noticed that Mom sometimes lingered longer with Autumn. The conversations felt deeper somehow, like they carried stories from before we were born. Mom would share memories from her nursing training or little pieces of her younger years that she didn't bring up when all three of us were together. It felt intimate, personal. I told myself there was a reason for it. Maybe Autumn needed something different. Maybe she asked questions I didn't think to ask. I never confronted Mom about it. I never even mentioned it. Because in every visible way, she treated us equally. She rotated outings. She checked in with both of us. She reminded us often that her love for her daughters was exactly the same, and I believed her. There was no resentment in me, just a quiet awareness, a sense that relationships could have layers not everyone could see. I learned early that love doesn't always look identical from the outside. Sometimes it adjusts itself to fit the person in front of you. Our house held all of that. Birthday cakes baked from scratch, even when Mom was exhausted. Holiday decorations pulled out year after year, slightly worn but full of tradition. School projects spread across the living room floor, while Mom sat cross-legged between us, offering advice and encouragement long past bedtime. Those ordinary days built the foundation of my childhood. They taught me about perseverance, about quiet sacrifice, about showing up even when you're tired. And they taught me something else too, something I didn't fully understand at the time. That even in a home filled with love, there can be subtle differences, tiny shifts in closeness, conversations that happen behind half-closed doors. Back then, I brushed it aside. I told myself it was nothing. Now, looking back, I sometimes wonder if those moments meant more than I ever realized. 3 years before my mom was diagnosed with the illness that would eventually take her, I made a decision that changed everything. I left my job in another city, packed up the life I had built for myself, and moved back to Pittsburgh. At the time, it didn't feel heroic. It felt necessary. The doctor had started using words that didn't sit right: decline, progression, management. I could see it in her face even before he said anything. Tasks that used to be routine were suddenly exhausting. Climbing the stairs left her breathless. Holding a coffee mug too long made her hands tremble. So I came home. I gave up stability, gave up the rhythm of my own life. Within weeks, I was back in my childhood bedroom, only now I wasn't the daughter being cared for. I was the one organizing medications, scheduling appointments, learning how to read lab results and insurance forms. Mom protested at first. She didn't want to burden me, as she put it. That word hurt more than she realized. I told her it wasn't a burden, that this is what family does. We show up when things get hard, but showing up came with a cost. My days became structured around her needs. Hospital visits in the morning, pharmacy runs in the afternoon, phone calls with specialists. I learned how to monitor her symptoms, how to anticipate the bad days before they fully arrived. I watched her shrink into herself physically, even as she tried to stay strong for me. The nights were the hardest. Pain doesn't respect schedules. Some evenings she couldn't sleep, shifting restlessly in the dark. That's when she would reach for my hand. Not dramatically, just quietly. A small squeeze, as if asking permission to speak, and she would talk. Not about her own fear, at least not directly. Instead, she worried about Autumn. Her voice would soften when she brought her up. Autumn used to tell me everything she said once, staring at the ceiling. Now, it's like she's keeping a wall up. At first, I tried to brush it off. Life gets busy, jobs get demanding. Philadelphia wasn't exactly next door. But Mom noticed patterns I hadn't paid attention to yet. The calls had grown shorter. What used to be daily check-ins turned into weekly texts. Sometimes weeks passed without a real conversation. And when they did speak, the tone felt different. surface level, polite. "She sounds rushed," Mom whispered one night. "Like she's somewhere else, even when she's on the phone." There was regret in her voice. Not anger, regret. She replayed old memories out loud, how Autumn used to call just to describe something small that happened at work. How she once shared every detail of her friendships and plans. Now, when Mom asked questions, the answers came clipped. Vague. "Work's fine. Everything's busy. I'm tired." I listened carefully, offering reassurance where I could. Maybe Autumn was overwhelmed. Maybe city life had pulled her into a different rhythm. But even as I defended her, I started noticing it too. Autumn's visits home became shorter. She'd arrive on a Friday evening, suitcase in hand, hug Mom tightly. And by Sunday morning, she'd already be checking flight times. There was always a reason, a meeting, a deadline. Something urgent waiting back in Philadelphia. Mom prepared for those visits like they were holidays. She'd ask me to pick up Autumn's favorite ingredients from the store. She'd push through her fatigue to sit upright at the table a little longer than usual. But after Autumn left, the house would feel heavier, quieter. "She used to stay longer," Mom said once. Not accusingly, just stating a fact. I didn't know how to respond. I tried reaching out to Autumn myself, asking gentle questions during our own calls. "How's work really? Are you happy there?" But she deflected in the same way. Quick answers, no details. Conversations that felt like checklists instead of connection. The emotional gap wasn't explosive. It was subtle. A slow widening space that no one quite named. Mom brought it up more often as her health declined. Not obsessively, but enough that I understood it weighed on her. She wondered if she had done something wrong, if she had missed a sign, if life in Philadelphia had simply pulled Autumn into a different orbit. What struck me most was the sadness in her voice, not because Autumn was busy, but because she didn't understand the distance. As her illness progressed, connection became more precious to her. Every visit mattered. Every phone call held weight. And when those calls felt hollow, it hurt more deeply than she admitted. I remember lying awake after those late-night conversations, staring into the dark, replaying her words, trying to make sense of the shift. At the time, I told myself it was just life. People grow, they change, they move away. But looking back now, I can see it more clearly. Something was shifting long before the funeral, long before the will, long before the envelope hidden beneath that nightstand drawer. We just didn't understand what it meant yet. Not long after those late-night conversations became routine, Mom slipped away quietly in her sleep. There was no dramatic final moment, no last speech, just a steady decline over several weeks. And then an early morning phone call from the hospice nurse. I remember sitting beside her bed after they told me. The room felt frozen. I held her hand, even though I knew she was already gone. I stayed there until the funeral home staff arrived, signing forms with hands that didn't quite feel like mine. Autumn flew in from Philadelphia that same day. She walked through the front door with red eyes and a small suitcase, and for a moment, we were just two daughters who had lost their mother. Whatever tension had been building before seemed to pause under the weight of grief. We planned a simple service together. That's what Mom would have wanted. Nothing elaborate. We chose a modest casket, flowers that felt appropriate but not extravagant. At the graveside ceremony, a small group of friends and relatives gathered. We stood close as the casket was lowered, the air heavy but quiet. Autumn spoke briefly with the people who came to pay their respects, thanking them on behalf of the family. I did the same. Then we drove back to the house in near silence, both of us drained in different ways. The day after the burial, practical matters began creeping in. Cemetery paperwork, final bills, loose ends. Autumn started asking about documents where Mom kept the house deed, whether there were other bank accounts, if I had found additional files beyond the main folder. She brought it up casually at first, over dinner, said it would be easier to organize everything sooner rather than later. I told her I'd already located a folder with the essential paperwork. She nodded, but I could see her mind working through possibilities. The next day, she began opening drawers in the study, flipping through files, quickly scanning headings and dates. She mentioned needing to return to Philadelphia soon because work was backing up. And just like that, she booked a flight for the following morning. One day after we buried our mother, she was packing her bag. She hugged me before. I'd promised we'd stay in touch about decisions, and that was it. I drove her to the airport at dawn. The ride was quiet. At security, she gave me a quick squeeze and disappeared into the line without looking back. The house felt different when I returned alone. Larger, emptier. That's when the real work began. Room by room, I started sorting through everything Mom had left behind. Clothes folded neatly in closets. Scarves she wore often that still carried a faint trace of her perfume. Bathroom cabinets filled with medications and half-used toiletries. I made piles, donate, keep, discard. Some days I moved quickly. Other days I'd stop for 20 minutes over a single letter or keepsake. It became my way of grieving, touching each object, deciding what stayed and what didn't. Then, while cleaning out her nightstand, I noticed something odd. The bottom drawer had a worn liner slightly lifted at one corner. When I peeled it back, my fingers brushed against something thick. An envelope. It was covered in dust as if it hadn't been touched in years. The placement felt deliberate. Nothing else was hidden there. Just that. I pulled it out slowly and sat down on the edge of the bed. Inside was an old crumpled photograph and several folded papers yellowed with age. The picture caught my attention first. Mom was younger in it, her face softer somehow. She was holding a baby girl, cradling her tenderly, looking down with an expression I had never seen before. The child wasn't me. I knew that immediately. And it wasn't Autumn. The baby's features didn't match either of us, at least not in any way I recognized. A strange unease settled in my chest. I unfolded the papers next. Legal language, dates, signatures. I didn't fully understand what I was looking at, but it was clear this wasn't something accidental. This had been kept hidden. The next morning, I slipped the photograph into my bag and began asking questions. I started with one of Mom's former nursing colleagues who still lived nearby. We sat in her living room with tea between us as she studied the image carefully, adjusting her glasses and leaning closer. She examined the background, Mom's clothing, the baby's blanket. After a long pause, she shook her head. She didn't recognize the child. It didn't match any story Mom had ever shared. I thanked her and moved on. Another longtime friend from church looked at it just as closely. She tried to recall distant cousins or extended family members. Nothing fit. Someone suggested it could have been a hospital case from Mom's nursing days. Another wondered if it might be a relative rarely mentioned. But no one knew for certain. Every visit ended the same way, with confusion. The more blank stares I received, the heavier the envelope felt in my bag. It wasn't just a photograph. It was something Mom had intentionally kept separate from the rest of her life. Separate from us. By the end of that day, I knew there was only one person left who might have answers. Mr. Lawrence Burke, Mom's longtime lawyer, the man she trusted with every confidential matter for years. I called his office and scheduled an appointment for that afternoon. If anyone knew why that photograph existed, it would be him. I drove straight to Mr. Lawrence Burke's office that afternoon, the envelope resting on the passenger seat beside me, like it had its own weight. He had been my mother's lawyer for as long as I could remember. Whenever she mentioned updating her will or handling property documents, his name came up with a quiet trust. If anyone knew what I was holding, it would be him. The waiting room felt strangely familiar. I had been there before years earlier when Mom needed to sign routine paperwork. Back then, it had felt like an adult space I didn't quite belong in. Now, I walked in alone, carrying something that made my hands unsteady. When his assistant called my name, I stepped into his office and took the seat across from his desk. He greeted me kindly, offering condolences again for Mom's passing. There was nothing unusual in his expression yet. I placed the envelope in front of him and said I needed him to look at what I'd found. He opened it methodically. First, he removed the photograph. He held it up to the light, studying the image carefully. Then he unfolded the yellowed papers, smoothing them out on his desk. He didn't rush. He read each page with focused attention, occasionally going back to reread certain lines. Minutes passed in silence. I watched his face change, almost imperceptibly. His brow tightening slightly, his posture shifting forward. He set the documents down gently and looked at me in a way that told me this wasn't small. He spoke quietly. "Your mother wanted this to stay private," he said, "unless something like this came up after she was gone." The words settled slowly. He explained that the documents I had found were connected to a chapter of Mom's life she had chosen not to discuss openly. He had been entrusted to safeguard that information, only revealing it if circumstances required it. Then he clarified what the papers actually were. Autumn had been legally adopted in 1988. The statement didn't land all at once. It unfolded in pieces: adoption papers, legal certification, formal documentation establishing her status from early childhood, separate from biological ties. I felt the room go quiet around me. Mr. Burke continued in the same measured tone. He confirmed that Mom had executed her final will while fully competent with medical documentation and witness signatures supporting her mental capacity at the time of signing. There had been no confusion, no impairment, no external control over her decisions. He emphasized that carefully. Then he explained the structure of the will itself. The house in Pittsburgh, our Hill District home, was not meant to be sold and divided in the traditional way. Instead, Mom had directed that it be converted into a charitable trust dedicated to supporting patients dealing with the same illness she had faced in her final years. The property was to serve a purpose beyond inheritance. It wasn't simply sentimental, it was intentional. He showed me the clause outlining that conversion. The language was clear: the house must be used for charitable support and could not be liquidated for personal distribution. I thought of Autumn's recent questions about deeds and bank accounts, the urgency in her voice about organizing assets quickly. Mr. Burke then moved to another provision in the will, one that felt even heavier. There was a no contest clause. He quoted it directly. Any beneficiary who attempted to challenge the will or exert undue influence over mom during a vulnerable period would forfeit their share entirely. The words were precise, legal, protective. He explained that during the time when mom's health had begun declining, there had been documented concerns about pressure placed on her regarding financial decisions. Emails, notes, conversations recorded in professional files. According to the documentation, those actions met legal standards for undue influence. Mom had anticipated the possibility of conflict, and she had structured her will accordingly. The clause didn't just discourage disputes, it penalized them. If someone formally contested the will without valid grounds, they would lose everything designated to them. I sat there, trying to connect what I was hearing with the life I thought I understood. Autumn's adoption, the charitable trust, the protective clause, the documentation of pressure. None of it was delivered dramatically. Mr. Burke remained steady, factual. He wasn't taking sides. He was presenting what had been signed and legally secured. He clarified that the adoption itself had been lawful and complete, giving Autumn full legal status within the family from childhood onward. But the will's final version reflected Mom's assessment of circumstances in her later years, specifically her concern about manipulation during periods of medical vulnerability. He handed copies of the relevant pages across the desk for me to see. Dates from the late 1980s on the adoption record, signatures from the final will execution, witness names, medical notes confirming capacity at the time of signing. Everything was documented. He told me Mom had insisted on these provisions personally, that she had been clear about her intentions, that she understood the emotional implications but wanted her wishes protected. As he spoke, I felt something shifting inside me, not explosive, not loud. Just a steady realignment of understanding. The childhood memories resurfaced in fragments, the subtle differences in closeness, the quiet conversations with Autumn, the late-night worries about distance, the way Mom had seemed both protective and guarded in certain areas. None of it had made sense in isolation. Now it formed a pattern. I didn't interrupt him. I let him finish explaining the timeline, the safeguards, the reasoning. When he finally leaned back in his chair, the envelope lay open between us. No longer mysterious, but no less heavy. He allowed silence to settle in the room. I wasn't angry, not in that moment. I was absorbing, replaying conversations, re-examining assumptions I had carried for decades without question. Mr. Burke's final reassurance was simple. The will was legally sound. It had been drafted carefully, signed properly, and fortified against challenge. Mom's wishes were explicit and enforceable. The meeting ended without drama. I gathered the documents back into the envelope, though they no longer felt like hidden fragments of the past. They felt like a key. Walking out of his office, I understood something clearly for the first time. The distance Mom had sensed, the urgency in Autumn's voice after the funeral, the pressure around selling the house. This wasn't just about grief. It was about choices Mom had already anticipated and protected against. And I had a feeling that what Mr. Burke revealed in that quiet office would not stay contained for long. That weekend, the calls started coming more often. At first, they sounded practical. Autumn said we needed to move forward with settling the estate quickly. She mentioned timelines, paperwork, the inconvenience of leaving things unresolved. Sometimes she called before work. Other times, it was late in the evening, her voice sharp with urgency. Then the conversations shifted. She began pushing hard to sell the house. Not later, not eventually, now. She talked about the market in Pittsburgh, how it was favorable for quick sales. She even mentioned potential buyers and real estate contacts, as if she had already begun exploring options. I told her the house wasn't meant to be sold, that Mom's will specified something different. Autumn brushed that aside. She argued that converting the house into anything else would only create holding costs, taxes, maintenance, utilities. She said liquidating it would make everything simpler, cleaner, fairer. Then she introduced the idea of an uneven split. She claimed she deserved a larger share of the estate. She referenced contributions she said she had made over the years, support during Mom's illness, responsibilities she felt she had carried. The way she framed it made it sound almost reasonable on the surface, like she was simply asking for recognition. I stood firm. I offered a compromise, instead dividing the savings accounts equally and leaving the property alone for now. I explained that the house held emotional value, that it represented something more than cash. She dismissed it immediately. The tone of her calls changed after that. What had started as negotiation turned into pressure. She accused me of dragging things out, of being selfish, of ignoring her circumstances. Then a message from an old friend, Sarah, added another layer. Sarah told me she had heard through mutual contacts that Autumn was dealing with serious financial problems in Philadelphia, mounting credit card debt, escalating spending. It wasn't gossip delivered casually, it was concern. Suddenly, the urgency behind the calls made more sense, but understanding it didn't change my position. The pressure intensified. Autumn's voice grew sharper during our conversations. She questioned my loyalty, suggested I was choosing sentiment over responsibility. She brought up childhood dynamics, implied that she had always been more involved, more present. Each call left me drained. 6 months after the burial, the conflict moved from private arguments to official action. A certified letter arrived one afternoon. Inside was a formal petition filed in Allegheny County Probate Court. Autumn was contesting Mom's will. She was requesting that the court override its terms and grant her a larger share of the estate. The language in the filing caught me off guard. She alleged contributions over the years that justified unequal division. She challenged the structure of the will itself. The petition forced a hearing date within weeks. What had been tense phone calls was now a legal battle. On the morning of the hearing, we sat on opposite sides of a courtroom downtown. It felt surreal, like stepping into a version of our family I never imagined. Autumn took the stand first. She spoke confidently, calmly. She described herself as the one who had truly been building the family with Mom from the very beginning. She talked about childhood responsibilities she claimed to have taken on, about financial help she said she provided during Mom's illness. I was the one who stayed involved when things got hard, she told the judge. That should count for something. Her delivery was polished, convincing. She painted a picture of dedication and sacrifice, framing her request for a larger share as a matter of fairness. Listening to her, I felt a strange mix of disbelief and exhaustion. When it was my turn, I didn't speak with the same force. I explained that I wanted to honor Mom's intentions, that fairness meant following what she had clearly set in writing. My words felt smaller in comparison, less dramatic, less rehearsed. The judge listened to both sides without immediate reaction. Then something shifted. Mr. Lawrence Burke entered the courtroom that morning quietly, taking a seat until he was called as a witness. As a drafting attorney for Mom's final will, his testimony carried weight. When he stepped onto the stand, he brought documents with him. He began with facts. He presented the official adoption papers from 1988, establishing Autumn's legal status from early childhood. The documents were clear, certified, and properly filed. Copies were handed to the judge. Then he moved to the will. He confirmed that Mom had executed it while fully competent. Medical notes supported her mental clarity at the time of signing. Witness signatures verified the process. There was no ambiguity about capacity. He explained that the will contained specific provisions Mom had insisted upon, most notably the directive that the Pittsburgh house be converted into a charitable trust dedicated to patient support. It was not to be sold for personal profit. Then, he addressed the clause that changed the atmosphere in the room. The no contest provision. He quoted it directly. Any beneficiary who attempted to exert undue influence over Mom or formally contest the will without legitimate grounds would forfeit their inheritance. He didn't speak emotionally. He spoke precisely. Next, he introduced documentation emails and notes showing that during a vulnerable period of Mom's declining health, pressure had been applied regarding financial decisions. The evidence met the legal threshold for undue influence. The implication was clear. If the court found the will valid and the evidence supported that, it meant that by filing this petition, Autumn had triggered the forfeiture clause herself. The courtroom grew quiet as the judge reviewed the documents. Autumn's earlier confidence seemed to falter slightly, but she maintained composure. There was no dramatic outburst, just the steady realization that the structure of the will had been carefully designed to withstand exactly this kind of challenge. 1 year later, the final ruling arrived. The court dismissed Autumn's petition entirely. The judge cited clear evidence of Mom's capacity at the time of signing and upheld the no contest clause. The adoption status, the charitable trust directive, and the undue influence documentation all stood uncontested in the final decision. Autumn was ordered to pay all attorney fees associated with the case, along with additional charges for bringing what the court determined to be a frivolous challenge. She received the ruling in writing shortly afterward. She briefly considered an appeal, but withdrew it when advised of the low likelihood of success and the mounting expenses. The decision was final. Under the terms of the will, and because she had chosen to contest it, Autumn forfeited her claim entirely. The legal battle ended, not with reconciliation, but with enforcement. Mom's wishes, exactly as she had written them, remained intact. When the ruling was handed down and the petition dismissed, the silence that followed felt heavier than the arguments that had filled the courtroom. Autumn did not look at me. She stood still for a moment, absorbing the judge's decision to enforce the no contest clause, and with it, the loss of her inheritance. Then she gathered her things and walked out without a word. In the weeks that followed, contact between us narrowed to nothing. There were no angry calls, no long emails trying to reopen the debate, just an absence. The number I had known for years eventually stopped connecting. Mutual acquaintances in Philadelphia could not or would not tell me much. I heard only fragments that she had moved out of her apartment, that she was staying with friends, that she was figuring things out. After that, even the fragments disappeared. It would be easy to say I felt only betrayal. The truth was more complicated. I felt grief again this time, not just for my mother, but for the sister I had believed I understood. Whatever choices Autumn had made, whatever pressures had driven her to file that petition in Allegheny County Probate Court, she was still the child my mother had brought home in 1988. The adoption papers Mr. Lawrence Burke had carefully laid on the table were legal documents, but they also represented years of shared meals, shared bedrooms, shared childhood memories in our Hill District home. And yet the court had made clear what my mother had already anticipated. Love did not cancel accountability. The charitable trust attached to the house stood firm. The clauses guarding against undue influence were not abstract legal language. They were a shield my mother had quietly arranged, long before any of us imagined a courtroom. Returning to the house, after everything felt different. The rooms were the same, the worn wooden floors, the narrow staircase, the kitchen window that caught the afternoon light. But the air seemed clearer. For months, the house had felt like contested ground. Now it felt again like what it had always been my mother's work made visible. She had spent her life caring for others. She had spent her life caring for others. As a night shift nurse, often coming home exhausted, yet still attentive to us. It felt right that the house reflect that same spirit of steady, practical care. The transformation did not happen overnight. There were repairs to manage paperwork, to file meetings with local organizers to hold. I approached it methodically, much the way my mother had approached everything, quietly, without spectacle. Over time, the front room became a space for small support gatherings. The dining room, once the site of family dinners and tense holiday conversations, was rearranged with folding tables and resource materials. The upstairs bedrooms were preserved carefully, not as relics, but as reminders of where the work had begun. Neighbors who had known my mother began to stop by. Some had worked alongside her at the hospital. Others remembered her, checking in on elderly residents after her shifts, still in her scrubs. They did not ask about the court case. They spoke instead about her steadiness, her sense of fairness, her insistence that both Malalari and Autumn be treated equally, even when one required more reassurance than the other. Running the center brought its own challenges. There were days when I questioned whether I had the energy to sustain it. The legal battle had taken more from me than I initially realized, but each time doubt surfaced, I returned to the documents Mr. Burke had shown me, not to relive the conflict, but to remember the clarity of my mother's intentions. The no contest clause, the charitable trust, the provisions against undue influence, these were not weapons. They were boundaries. And that more than anything was the lesson that settled in after Autumn's departure. Boundaries are not betrayals. My mother had loved us both. The adoption in 1988 had formalized what she had already decided in her heart. But she had also recognized that love without structure can be strained by fear, by financial desperation, by the subtle pressures people exert when they feel entitled to more. Family, I learned, is not defined solely by shared history or legal status. It is shaped by choices daily, often unremarkable. Choices to act with integrity. Autumn's escalating pressure to sell the house. Her petition, her confident testimony in court, those were choices. So was my decision to stand quietly, to present the facts, to let Mr. Burke introduce the evidence, rather than respond in anger. In the end, the court's ruling did not restore what had been lost between us. It clarified it. Sometimes I think about Autumn in Philadelphia or wherever she is now. I wonder whether she sees the sequence of events differently, whether she believes the outcome was unfair, or whether she recognizes the pattern the judge identified. I may never know. The absence of contact has become its own kind of answer. What remains is the house in Pittsburgh, steady and occupied. On certain evenings when a support meeting has ended and the chairs are stacked away, I stand in the quiet living room and listen. The silence no longer feels like aftermath. It feels like continuity. My mother's life was built on care, discipline, and foresight. In protecting the house with legal precision, she was not favoring one daughter over the other. She was ensuring that her values would outlast conflict. The trust enforces that promise. The no contest clause reminds me that actions have consequences. The provision regarding undue influence underscores that vulnerability must be guarded. From all of it, I carry a simpler understanding. Love can be sincere and still require limits. Integrity can be quiet and still be firm. And sometimes the truest way to honor family is not by avoiding conflict, but by standing within the boundaries they carefully drew. The house remains, the work continues, and in that continuity I feel closest to her. Family secrets have a way of surfacing when we least expect them. Inheritance can reveal fractures we didn't know were there. And sometimes choosing integrity means accepting distance instead of forcing unity. If you've stayed with me through this stories, thank you. It truly means more than you know. If any part of it resonates, I'd love to hear your thoughts or experiences below. And if you value stories like this, you're always welcome to stay a while longer.